So good morning, everybody. We're going to start the Water Commission meeting of October 15, 2020. First, I'd like to call this meeting to order. And the Commission Secretary, can you please do the roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Young?
Yeah. Present.
Commissioner Davis?
Here.
Vice Chair Kilborn?
Here.
Chair Keller?
Here.
And Liaison Sneddon? Here.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Mr. Hagmark, do we have any changes to the agenda? You're on mute. I assume that means no changes.
There's one minor change I wanted to point out. The meeting at the top of the agenda shows it to be a 14-hour meeting today, and it is not a 14-hour meeting. It is just a 2-hour meeting. So it should say 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Thank you.
That's a very welcome change. Thank you very much. Okay, so do we have any public comment at this moment? Anyone from the public that would like to make a comment that's something that's not on the agenda?
Chair Keller, no public comment at the time.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So we have 2 consent items. Do we want to have any discussion, or is there a motion to approve them? One of them is the meeting minutes, and the other one is the agreement with the USGS, United States Geological Survey, on the surface water and groundwater monitoring.
I'd move to approve. I think Jeffrey's raising his comment.
I do have a
Yes.
question,
Yes.
Chair Keller, and that is on the USGS agreement. I was just curious with any of the groundwater wells, whether they are in areas where we have domestic wells.
Chair Keller, Commissioner Young, yes. So some of the wells are in the Foothill Basin where there is domestic wells. There isn't any in the storage unit 1, so the downtown area. There's no wells, but there are some in the Foothill Basin.
So I'm just curious whether there would be any benefit for that particular area in the foothills to include some other types of chemical analysis like nitrate or anything that might give us some indication that we could have some surface contamination getting down into a aquifer where we have domestic well water being drawn up.
So the USGS work that they're doing is not a water quality profile. That would be something that our city staff would have to do to pull that. So that would be under a separate study. But I think that kind of leads into a topic that we've been talking about for a while, which is starting work on forming a GSA. And so that GSA would then have all users who are pumping from that basin participate in the cost of managing that basin and tracking down the source of nitrate contamination, likely septic tank in the area. We do not have a nitrate issue with any of the city's wells, so I can speak to that. But I do know the Lincolnwood Mutual Water Company has had one of their wells fail as a result of nitrates getting into one of their wells. And that's an item that will be coming back to the commission probably in the next couple months here. We've been working closely with them because they've asked to re-drill a well. And there's a lot to that. I can get into that later, but I think that's where we are currently on the testing and monitoring that's going on.
And is our well that's in the foothills, what depth is it at, if you know?
We have several wells up in the Foothill Basin. I believe there's 5. And so they largely, I think they go down to about 500 feet. And the well perforations are at different intervals. So it's not one big screened all the way down. There's certain intervals where the aquifer is present that we have screen material there. So we'd have to look at each well to
And-
identify that.
And do we have an idea of how deep the domestic wells are in that area?
We don't, and we don't have a good sense of where all the domestic wells are. The permitting for those for a long time was handled by the county, and there wasn't good documentation. We've since taken over. We know of, a handful of them, but I believe there's others out there. So part of the formation of a GSA would be to identify where all of those ag wells and or domestic wells are, and to make sure that they're included in this GSA. And then the other part is to make sure that if they aren't using any of these old ag wells, that they are abandoned properly. So there is a lot of work to do with that area.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Young. I think this is an important issue, and it wasn't part of this whole USGS monitoring, but I think it's important to start thinking about the formation of the GSA, starting putting kind of a time frame for that, and begin contacting all the important stakeholders and all. So maybe we should come back to that in a future meeting. Thank you very much, Commissioner Young, for bringing this up. So there are no further comments, and we have a motion, but I don't have a second.
I will second the motion to approve.
Okay, thank you. So if we could have the roll call.
The motion to approve the consent item, Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kilborn,
Yes.
and Chair Keller.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you very much. And so we're now going to be moving on to our administrative items. And the first one is a report on our water system, an annual report, and Mr. Matthew Ward will be making that report to us. So please go ahead.
Chair Keller, Commissioners, I'm going to just kick this off a little bit. We certainly have a lot going on in water resources, and in particular in the water fund. And what we've are attempting to do today is kind of emulate some of the work that we've done with the collection system annual report, wanting to provide information on what's going on behind the scenes in water treatment and distribution, and offer an opportunity to ask questions and explore what's going on. We're really proud of all the work that's going on. It's been a big year for us. We've got a lot of work done to date. And we'd like to make this something that we do every year in an effort to keep the dialogue going, because there's a lot of stuff that unfortunately goes on and people have no idea, and that all this great work is being done. And so we ask for your attention today to kind of give us some feedback on what you'd like to see more of in future years. And obviously feel free to ask questions along the way. I'd like to start off by introducing Matt Ward, who was recently appointed as our water system manager, taking over for Kathy Taylor. And with that, I'll turn it over to him to kick off the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hagmark, and good morning, Chair Keller and Water Commissioners. Thanks for giving the introduction there, Joshua. I think we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the purpose of today's presentation is to provide a water system overview. Most of you are familiar with this, but for our viewers, we thought it would be good to include that. Review some of our major initiatives, some of the projects, programs, overarching things that we're championing, and then review capital improvement programs and projects. Also review system performance measures, including Gibraltar Dam, our water treatment facilities, and our water distribution system. Some of these performance measures were provided to you with your packet. And then we'll also be touching base on some of our pilot projects, which are real exciting. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is our water system overview, and I know the water commissioners, you're familiar with this. It's always impressive to see how we are able to supply water to our region. One of the fun facts that I always share with others is how Gibraltar water is conveyed to Laurel Reservoir, which is our forebasin for the Decatur Water Treatment Plant, and then distributed throughout the city, all by gravity. So that's always a fun fact to share. Gibraltar recently celebrated its 100th year birthday, and many of our components in our distribution system, mainly our water mains, are also at that centennial mark as well. Next slide. And of course, you are familiar with Mr. Hagmark and myself as the water system manager. I would also like to introduce later Teresa Lancy, who was recently appointed to the water distribution superintendent position. She oversees over 40 staff with the support of her 3 supervisors, who include Robbie Days, who oversees our pipelines, Roger Arroyo, who oversees our pump stations and reservoirs, and Maggie Heinrich, who is our acting water distribution supervisor, overseeing our metering, admin, and planning efforts. Next, I want to introduce Andrew Rhodes, who is our water treatment superintendent. You saw him in August, presented on a couple of items, and he oversees our Cater water treatment plant, as well as the Ortega groundwater treatment plant, and has really been instrumental for helping us manage our desal contract and understand the treatment components there. And he has supported and overseen over 15 employees for our treatment facilities. And Ben Spencer, who is the water treatment supervisor, assists him in that. And altogether, we have 55 full-time employees and probably about another dozen hourly employees who make sure that the water system is operated. It's kind of, sometimes you think about what it takes, based on the previous slide, to get water all the way from our surface supplies to downtown. It's quite an effort. Next slide, please. Also want to mention, feel free to ask questions as we go. I'll also pause for questions at certain points throughout the presentation. So on the left, you see the water fund budget is over $55 million. The water system operations and capital component of that is over half of that amount, so $28 million in total. And the main components of that is our capital program, which is almost 14 million. Our water distribution program, which is nearly 9 million. Water treatment program, which is just above 4 million. And our recycled water program, that's at about $1 million annually. Next slide, please. So I want to go over those current initiatives that I mentioned earlier. That'll include our asset management, our water sales agreements or our regional partnerships, our advanced metering infrastructure work, and then also some of the results from the water distribution infrastructure plan, which you also have a copy of. I do want to mention that the copy that you have is actually not final, it's actually in the draft form. So wanted to make that clear. Next slide, please. So our asset management update. Want to provide a little bit of background. The water system, as you would imagine, has tens of thousands of assets or components to it. And we are working to track those components using electronic inventorying as a method for tracking our assets by location. We're also using maintenance management software in order to track the conditions and also our cost for budget purposes, and also projecting the useful life. As far as maintenance management or asset management goes, it really takes about a decade of effort in order to get a fully developed asset management program. So as you can see, we're fairly new to the asset management, maintenance management software component. Water distribution began working using Cartograph as a database. It's actually a database that's used citywide, which is important. It also adds complexity because it involves other users such as transportation, streets, and we've been working collectively to figure out how we can track all of our assets collectively, and especially in areas where our assets are, there's areas of overlap. For example, between streets and water, and I'll talk more about that later in how we're coordinating. Cater is currently working to implement the maintenance connection software We expect to have the implementation complete in 2021. And as a part of our, One Water goals, we've had our wastewater staff working with the staff at Cater to implement maintenance connection because they haven't fully implemented at El Estero. And it's been hugely beneficial because their advanced knowledge of asset management, of maintenance connection has allowed for us to be able to reduce the cost to implement a Cater and also make sure that we have a successful implementation and adoption of the software. Another exciting component, which we'll get into further detail later when we talk about our pilot work, is our use of GPS tools and GIS updates. In 2018, we began piloting high precision GPS tools using EOS positioning systems, which is, you'll see later, allows us to grab asset information by location down to basically the centimeter grade. So that's very exciting because in the water system, many of our assets are buried. So being able to get high precision information really helps us stay on top of our maintenance, stay on top of the location of our assets, and have a high degree of confidence as we update our GIS or our electronic mapping system. We can look at that information, and when we're sharing it with the public and our contractors, and as our operators are using it, we can have a high degree of confidence that the information we're starting to gather is very accurate. I do want to point out that the difference between when we implemented electronic mapping or using Esri software was in 2003, and it's just now that we're getting this high precision GPS tools where they're really field ready or ready for our sector to begin to adopt and use it. So what we're looking to do, and we'll talk about a bit later in our pilots, is to update all of our GIS information so that way we can have this high precision information available for the community and future use. Next slide, please. So you've seen this graphic before. I just want to provide you a brief update on the automated metering infrastructure. We are currently on schedule for deployment or RFP procurement. The RFP is on the street right now, and we'll be coming back to you probably in February to award a contract for AMI and looking to deploy probably late spring, early summer, and begin to get that system rolled out over the next couple of years. We're also going to have to figure out, the impacts to our organization with this new information that we're going to be gathering. So we'll be coming back to you for feedback and also to share what we believe it'll take in order to make sure that we're able to maximize the use of AMI data for our customers and also for our operations group. Next slide, please. So our water sales agreements, and we really look at those as regional partnerships. And I just want to touch briefly on how system operations is impacted and how we contributed to the success of getting some of these water sales agreements lined up. And that's involved collaborating with our neighboring agencies, but also collaborating internally using, again, that One Water philosophy of how we can come up with ways to deliver recycled water. So involving our wastewater treatment staff with our distribution staff, our water distribution staff, to look at the system and how we can model it, how we can tweak it, how we can test it, so that way we can ensure that we are able to maximize the use of our resources. And same with the Montecito partnership that we're pursuing. A key component of making sure that that was viable was identifying existing infrastructure that we could use in order to convey water from the desal plant to the Cater water treatment plant. Next slide, please. So another major initiative, and it was quite a workload this year, was to undergo the water distribution infrastructure plan. It's been quite a journey, and a lot of folks were involved with it, which is good. And as you're aware, the purpose of that was to develop a long-term capital improvement plan that guides investment decisions for aging system infrastructure while improving system reliability, redundancy, and operational flexibility. And we did that in 4 phases. Involved planning, hydraulic modeling, infrastructure evaluation using existing studies in order to inform and update a capital improvement plan, which is resulting in the water distribution infrastructure report. Next slide, please. Some key findings were regarding storage capacity improvements and prioritized replacement needs. So I want to unpack that a little bit because we did learn a lot from this study. Some of the stuff we expected, which was the premise for doing the study, but there was also some interesting findings that I'll get into. One was that we identified decreasing storage needs. So as our system was developed, we knew that parts of the system had been adopted from the USBR. Also, parts of our system were a part of developments where we inherited assets that were a part of the development. So we really needed to look at how, what are our future demands and where do we need to store our water? So part of the decreasing storage needs was we figured out was that we're storing less water in the system in order to deal with changes in water quality, really regulations. So we're operating our system far differently than we did in the past, where we used to maximize storage for all kinds of reasons. Some of those were fire flow concerns. Some of those were just simply we can pump water off peak or perhaps produce water at certain times, and it was easier for the operations group. Currently, we're running our reservoirs at pretty much daily levels. And what I mean by that is every 24 hours, we'd like to have the water enter the system and then go to our customers. So we've made some changes there. There's also been a lot of improvements in efficiency, mainly on customers' ends, but where they're using different fixtures that you're familiar with in order to reduce their water demands. And then, of course, conservation has been a tool that we've been using to manage supply, and that's impacted our overall storage needs. And then also fire suppression improvements have changed the way that we store water, where we have more sprinkler systems in buildings. And from the study, we identified that our current available storage is around 32 million gallons. And what we identified was that by 2015, we're going to be looking to store more, about 19.5 million gallons. So as you can tell, that's a large decrease and resulted in some impacts to how we plan to replace our storage. As far as capacity improvements, there was some fire flow improvements that were identified. Those were mainly small and less than 1% of the overall system, and we're going to roll those improvements into our next couple of years of water main replacement planning. Chair Keller, can I answer a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. So the 19.5 million gallons, so what does that represent in terms of our daily use? So how much storage do we have when we think about 19.5, roughly? Is it a few days, day?
So what that is that's based on average day demands.
Uh-huh.
And it includes also a margin of storage for emergency.
Okay, so it's roughly a little bit more than a day, but not much more.
Right.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Davis?
A really just minor question. Looking at the map that you had in there of the resources, and the report said you had 13 active reservoirs, right? When I count on the map, I get 8 reservoirs, and then I get these hydropneumatic tanks, which I'm unfamiliar with. Is that a combination when you say 13 active reservoirs? Do we have actually 13 reservoirs? I could only count 8 on the map. Sorry about the detail.
Yeah, I think that's just a part of the map that we have to edit. But yes, we do have 13 active reservoirs, and that doesn't include the hydropneumatic tanks. Those are a separate element.
Okay. Oh, great. Thanks.
Thanks for your questions. So continuing on with capacity improvements, We also found through the infrastructure plan, increased resiliency, ways to improve connectivity between our pressure zones, between our treatment facilities and our storage facilities, which I'll show more in a map later. And some other findings were prioritized replacement needs. We looked at previous asset management studies, incorporated the condition assessments in those studies into our overall assessment of our replacement needs, and then determined the asset rehabilitation and replacement sequencing. Because we're looking at such large capital work, we needed to determine the sequencing that the system could accept. Next slide, please. So this is just a snapshot in large of all the different findings. And as you can see, they're distributed throughout the city. This includes some major infrastructure improvements, as well as a lot of minor improvements. All these improvements are to take place over the next 30 years, but the majority of the work is going to be happening in the next 10 years, which will be reflected in our budget and some of the projects that we're going to talk about. Next slide, please. So here's the resulting budget from the 30-year capital improvement plan from the water distribution infrastructure work. As you can see, there's almost $450 million in total capital. That's today's dollars that we need to invest in our system in order to make sure that it's reliable in supplying drinking water for the future. And that equates to about $15 million in capital investment annually. There wasn't a ton of surprises that came about as far as the figures, because we had done some previous studies. However, it did give us fresh numbers. The distribution system is the largest asset that Water Resources owns. And so although the cost is a bit staggering, it is going to be implemented over a long period of time. And as you can see, the large majority of that pie chart is for water mains at nearly $300 million. And we plan to replace water mains, as you're aware, at 2% of our system rate over the next 20 years, which will handle a significant amount of our water main needs. And we'll talk more about that. We also knew that many of our reservoirs are between some as old as 100 years and have received some improvements over time, but others, are the majority of them are at least 50 years without significant investment. So a large part of why we did this study was to determine what reservoirs, what our storage needs were, where do we need to invest in storage, and so that $75 million represents the result of the study. What was perhaps a little bit more telling, or I would say maybe surprising, but not so surprising, was the overall cost of advancing our water systems information. So, as you know, AMI is really a customer demand at this point, and it's going to have some costs associated with it ongoing, as well as our SCADA system, which tracks all of our ability to control the system and monitor the system, our maintenance management software, and then also some minor costs for additional studies as regulations come about, and we have to adapt our system to meet those regulations. And then there's some other costs for pump stations, valves, and groundwater to keep all of those assets performing, either doing some rehab work or small replacement work, what we call baseline capital. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to be moving on to capital improvement programs and projects and some of the results of the distribution study and how it impacts capital. Okay. Thank you. So here's a list of our major capital projects. I'm just going to touch on the major ones at this point, and we'll be revisiting some of this when we come back and discuss budget next month. So I'll be talking about the desal conveyance pipeline, the Cater Chlorine Contact Basin project, as well as Vic Trace reservoir replacement and our ongoing water main replacement work. Next slide. So I know this is a bit hard to see, and it's something we put together and I'm hoping to refine over time. But what it does demonstrate is how some of the major capital projects tie together. So if you look at the legend there, you can see that site one is the desal conveyance main, which actually connects the desal plant to the Cater water treatment plant by way of that light blue line and the red line that runs between the two assets, between the desal plant and the Cater water treatment plant. At Cater, we'll be proposing that we move forward with a chlorine contact time basin, which is a project that was born out of the need to create enough contact time within the clear well at Cater. I'll talk more about that project in detail. And then you also see how that blue line that runs from the Cater treatment plant down to site 3, which is the Victrace Reservoir replacement project, how we plan to do some rehab work along that transmission main. And if you look at the whole thing, this is how we're basically going to convey water between our surface treatment plants and our major storage site on the west side of the city. Next slide, please. So zooming in a bit regarding the desal conveyance line, this is just a map outlining a pipeline. It's about 2 miles of 24-inch transmission main, and this is the new pipeline that will be required to connect our desal plant to Cater. And water distribution has been actively involved in helping review this new asset and as well as water treatment and what it'll mean for the city. Some of the benefits of this pipeline beyond connecting our 2 surface supplies and adding that resiliency is the ability to also convey surface water supplies on a temporary basis or as needed down to the low zone. Next slide, please. So continuing on with current capital, which we'll be bringing to you next month, we have the Cater chlorine contact time basin. So if you look at the square object in the middle of this pre-design or really survey document, that is the existing clear well at Cater. And as you will recall, we were looking at doing some improvements within the clear well to help circulate water through that clear well and prevent short circuiting in order to meet contact time requirements. In looking at the design for that project, we identified some constructability issues as well as some seismic issues that needed to be dealt with. And ultimately, we had to look at coming up with a different design that would support the ongoing needs for the clear well. And that's how the Cater chlorine contact time basin project was formed. What you see to the left there is actually one of our basins that we use for sludge. And what we're going to be proposing is that we build a separate 2.5 million gallon contact time basin, which will connect to the existing clear well and help meet the chlorine contact time needs, as well as provide some redundancy and additional storage at Cater, which is our hub for water supply throughout the region and to the city. From Cater, we can move water anywhere in our system. So connecting the desal plant to Cater will also have, will provide that resiliency and additional ways to distribute water throughout the system, but it'll also allow us to blend water, which will have benefits throughout the system. Next slide. So that third site that I showed you on the map is Victrace Reservoir. And we've been looking to replace this reservoir for some time. And finally, we're getting to the point now where we can support that. And what you see is an aerial of Victrace Reservoir. It's a 10 million gallon reservoir. It is the largest reservoir, or the second largest reservoir in our system. It's the largest reservoir on the west side of town. And what we're proposing is that we replace this reservoir with a buried tank, and we create a storage hub that is able to serve the low zone of the city, or the downtown area of the city, including the Mesa. It's going to be a significant project. about $41 million. And we'll be talking more about that when we come back to present on budget. But this will be a significant planning effort. It's a little further out in the planning horizon than what we'll be presenting, but we just wanted to give you a fuller picture of the water distribution infrastructure plan work and what our ultimate plan is going to be for how we make a more resilient system. Next slide. So I know this is a little hard to see, but this is just a snapshot of water main replacement planning and the 2% replacement work. It just so happened that Measure C was passed and we were able to get more capital funding for our streets program and our transportation programs. And so what we're looking to do is to partner with them to some degree and coordinate the replacement of our water assets as well as our street assets. So most of our water assets, they're buried for at least 50 years for our valves and in some cases 100 years for our pipes. The street maintenance cycle is more on a 7-year basis. So we've got two very different moving targets there. And it's really important to the public that when we go and we replace the water main, that we don't do it ahead of our street work, because then it just has, it's just poor scheduling. So we've been working hard to meet quarterly with our streets group, and that includes their capital work as well as their operations work, because they're actively doing paving in both sections, to make sure that we try to get our water mains replaced before they do their street work. And so far it's been going very well. The public doesn't always see that, but the result is nice when you have the work coinciding so close, and what our residents see is the water main work, and then shortly thereafter the street work occurring. Next slide. So now I'm going to be moving to water system operations, touching a bit on what our operations do, as well as some of the key performance measures that we have, some of the performance measures that stand out to us. Next slide. So Gibraltar Dam, we're ultimately responsible for reporting to the DSOD, coordinating conveyance with water supply and water treatment, and monitoring water quality and sampling at the reservoir. We're also responsible for coordinating with other agencies, that's COME, USBR, County Flood Control, as well as others. What's kind of surprising is that the asset is supported primarily by 2 full-time employees, also at times by others from our engineering team, as well as our distribution group, in order to do special projects, do capital projects and such. But on a regular basis, we have 2 employees up there who perform operations and maintenance duties, preventative maintenance tasks. A lot of what they're responsible for is also during storms to make sure that we pass through debris through the debris gate and make sure that the operations there are seamless and well coordinated with our water treatment group, which I'll talk a little bit more on water quality and the impacts there. And another significant part of what they do is road maintenance. There's several miles of road that connect Gibraltar during the winter and high flows. There's actually 2 access roads to the dam. The lower access road is inaccessible during parts of the winter, so it's really important that we do road maintenance and we keep those roads cleared. For those of you who have been on that road, you understand the terrain is quite steep and rugged. So it's important that we stay on top of that maintenance security, or that maintenance. And going to security, something that's really important is that we have people at the dam monitoring the dam. There's a lot of people that go in the backcountry, and we do a great job of interacting with them, making sure that they have access to the forest, but at the same time, don't climb out in the dam and do other things like that. So our dam caretaker, Frank Dealey, is very committed to watching that facility, as well as his partner, Eduardo Castillo. The 2 of them make sure that we have pretty much constant supervision of the dam. Next slide. Our water treatment operations. they're responsible for drinking water quality, supporting water supply management, consulting on desal, and coordinating with member and neighboring agencies. That includes Kachuma, COMB, and really, I was impressed in taking on my new role at how well Andrew Rhodes, the treatment superintendent, makes this look like a small part of his job, but he also manages the not only COMB, but the JPA members. He coordinates really well and manages expectations there. And we also deliver water to the Cooper Mutual Water Company, which I know you're aware of. And then periodically, we're working with Goleta as well as needed to make sure that we're good neighbors on an operational basis. And if we have a small need for water or they have a small need for water, that we're able to coordinate that. The image on the right, upper right, I wanted to just draw some attention to, because at times that is what the water that we're dealing with on the left of those three glasses, that's the water that we're dealing with at our treatment facility. And our treatment operations staff are constantly working with the COMB staff in order to maximize our use of Gibraltar water when available. But as you'll see in the following slide, that's not always the case. But they just do a good job of making the water on the left turn into the water of the right. And part of that process is the person you can see on the bottom left there, that's Winter Martinez, who is cleaning out one of our SED basins for our treatment plant, which they do twice a year. And they also perform coring of the media that they can use to predict the useful life of that media, as it is a very expensive item. And so predicting the useful life of that is very important. Next slide. So continuing with our water treatment operations, as you're aware, and I mentioned earlier, the program includes the Decatur Water Treatment Plant, the Ortega Groundwater Treatment Plant, and the hydroelectric plant. And some of the performance highlights we'll touch on each of those for our surface water production, energy production, and groundwater production. Next slide. So what you see here is a snapshot of the Decatur Water Treatment Plant. And on the right, you see our surface water trends. And as you know, from year to year, they fluctuate, but ultimately in recent years, going back to 2014, we've seen a pretty consistent reduction in demand that kind of flattens out into where we're currently at right now. And we have yet to see the demand rebound much, and that is in line with some of our conservation goals. And as you can see in the orange colors below, that's the JPA members' usage, and it kind of, to some degree, matches the city's usage, except for maybe in 2013. So anyway, those are the trends. We're always working with our JPA partners to make sure that we're balancing out the needs of the South Coast and being good partners in surface water supply. Next slide, please. Energy production. This is something that's exciting, and I know it's on the Commission's radar, but is use of our energy production facility, the hydro plant. And as you can see, the two images of the right, the water coming from Gibraltar, to the image on the lower left, the hydro production facility. And last year we were able to exceed offsetting our electrical demands by 18%. So we created that 18% surplus, which we sold back to SCE. And as you'll notice, specific months we were able to exceed our demands, with the exception of just a few months in February and March, April, where we received most of our storm water, which we then have to deal with the more turbid water, and also we tend to run up against our cap for what we can take from Gibraltar. So those are the months that we tend to offset and rely on Kachuma supply for water production. And we're, again, really excited to see that facility continue to produce more water. Next slide's fine, thank you. Briefly, just wanted to touch on groundwater, Ortega Groundwater Treatment Plant, and the corporation well rehabilitation. As you know, we're resting our basin, but we also need to continue on with maintenance. We test our wells periodically as required to provide water quality samples. And then we also have to maintenance them periodically to rehab the downhole well casing. So it's an ongoing effort. We did produce some water this year, but it was mainly to support this project where the groundwater basin tends to recharge a little faster. So we pumped water for a period of time in order to perform the rehab work on this well that was needed. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa Lancy, Water Distribution Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. I'm very pleased to be with you this morning to share with you some of the things that we have going on in water distribution operations. As you can see from this map, we have a lot going on. The different colors represent the 17 different pressure zones that are in our system. As we discussed earlier, we have 13 active reservoirs, 14 pump stations, a little over 300 miles of potable water pipe. We have a completely separate recycled water distribution system we oversee. We have over 27,500 water meters and service connections that are connected to those distribution systems. And with all this complexity, I just wanted to point out that we are at the highest rated system by the state of a D5 system that we have to oversee. And the simplest way that I know to kind of summarize what we do is we are in charge of managing everything from when the water leaves the treatment plant till it arrives at the customer or the private property. Next slide, please. So this is just some of the programs and the asset classes that we oversee. We don't have time to get into all of the things that we do, but this is just kind of a little sampling, and within those different asset classes like water mains, we have various programs such as main replacement and main repairs. In the photo on the right, you'll see operator Corey Olison, who is working on a SCADA panel, which is part of our instrumentation system, which is another program we oversee. That system, it allows all the different systems and all the different facilities we have spread out through the city to provide data and controls here at our offices, and also to interact with Cater Water Treatment Plant. And that is very valuable because sometimes we need to be able to look at trends and be able to operate these facilities from a remote location. And it's completely standalone system, so it's independent of the internet. And we maintain it that way specifically to reduce any kind of security risks to that system. Next slide, please. So today we're going to go over some of our performance highlights and talk to you about some of our performance measures, which we commonly refer to as P3s. And the photo on the right, you see operator Ernesto Lazaro manually operating one of our valves. In the photo on the left, you see operator Jeff Becker working with one of our recycled water customers. And next slide, please. But first, I wanted to update you a little bit about where we're at with main breaks. As you can see, our 25-year average is around 70 main breaks per year. Typically, we've been falling more below that line, but in more recent years, we are going more above that line. Next slide, please. This shows the overall average for North America, and while we're also below the overall North American average in general, we have been above it in recent years. And this is just an overall industry-wide trend. Next slide, please. You can see that it is trending upward because the main cause of this is that a lot of the post-World War II cast iron pipe that was installed is getting near the end of its useful life and is commonly experiencing failures. And we've been keeping an eye on these trends and are actively managing our water main replacement to become more and more surgical on how we choose which pipes we replace, looking at condition assessment as well as risk in order to determine which pipes are most in need of replacement, as well as trying to do those coordinations within the city with our streets and our wastewater folks. And we just wanted to share our appreciation for the support for increasing to the 2% replacement rate. It is a significant workload, but we feel that it's going to really pay a lot of dividends in the long run in being able to find these pipes that are at greater risk and be able to get those out of our system and get those addressed and start to hopefully make this trend line go back down. Next slide, please. Oh, one of the metrics that I'm very pleased to be able to share with you is our goal as far as responding to water main emergencies. We are able to restore water service within 12 hours, 97% of the time. And that number, that 12 hours, is from when we are first notified about a possible issue until the water is actually back on in the customer's homes. So we understand this is probably one of the aspects of what we do that's most visible to the public and can cause the most disruption to their lives. And so we take it very seriously to make sure that we deal with these emergencies in a efficient, safe manner and try to reduce the amount of disruption overall to our customers. Next slide, please. Here, I just want to show you that we've been ramping up our efforts to exercise our valves. Valves are extremely important to the overall operation of the system. They allow us to be able to shut down portions of the system for repairs, whether they be planned or emergency. You can see in FY18 that we were far below our target, and there's various reasons for that. The primary reason being having vacancies and staffing. We also had some competing priorities in different projects, such as meter replacement, but it's not as simple as just turning a valve off, because it has the ability to create water hammer when you're opening and closing valves, and water hammer can potentially damage our pipes. And so having operators that are well-trained in how we do this and doing so in a very carefully controlled manner is extremely important. And in the photo on the left, you see operator Scott Matchin using a device which is called a valve actuator. And that device not only operates the valve, opens and closes it, it also records the number of turns that it takes to do so. And that's an important performance metric for us as well, to be looking at how many turns it takes over time as we manually and actuate these valves, of how many turns it changes over time. And using our Cartograph system, we're able to track those things, and it's another item that we can use as we are prioritizing our water mains and looking at the valve and the valve condition as well as the main condition as we're prioritizing areas for replacement. Next slide, please. Here, I just wanted to show you a representation of the frequency of some of the service calls that we go to every year. This is just a frequency. It does not reflect the amount of time that's involved with actually responding to all of these calls. In particular, I'd like to draw your attention to leak investigation is a fairly small portion of that pie, but it actually is a huge amount of time that we spend investigating potential leaks to determine whether it's a water system issue or a private property issue. If it does end up being a private property issue, we tend to try to reach out to the customers, work with them. As you can see in the picture on the left, that is a meter reader, Sean Bakir, and he spends a lot of time working with our customers, calling them, notifying them about a potential increase in their water use based on their meter read. And he does a great job with this, because it's always bad news to get that your water use has increased and you might have a high bill, but it's so much nicer to have a friendly voice that tries to point you to resources and programs that can assist you versus just finding out this information in the mail. And also on the right is Carlos Lamos, meter reader, performing one of these customer service calls. And I also wanted to point out that we are going to be continuing to look at how we handle customer service as we move forward with our automated metering infrastructure program. It's going to change our business processes, and it's going to have some impacts on how we manage our customer service. And so we'll be returning to you in the future to be talking more about how our customer service is going to be evolving with the addition of that new technology. Next slide, please. So this is an area where both me and Mr. Ward are very happy about speaking to and sharing with you. The water industry is always evolving, and there's always new technologies. Some of them are great. Some of them are turn out to be not as useful as you had hoped. And so we have worked with this company called Isle Utility and joined their technology approval group, which has this tremendous networking capability where we work with these other utilities that are also members, and they can pilot different technologies, and then we share the experiences. So other utilities, especially some of the larger ones like LA Department of Water and Power or Metropolitan Water District, that have more bandwidth to try out some of these newer technologies and see which ones are really very useful and which ones are maybe not really there yet as far as being ready to roll out for an industry standard. And this is sort of our commitment to research and development. We want to try to make sure that we're always trying to use the latest and greatest and most appropriate technologies, because as you'll see with some of the pilot projects that I'm about to discuss, it can really make some major impacts to our effectiveness as a utility. Next slide, please. So as Matt mentioned earlier, we have been piloting the use of high precision GPS. And this is something that we've been really wanting to get more precise information on our assets and being able to locate our assets underground for quite some time, but the technology just wasn't really there yet. And now this, as he mentioned, this is sub-centimeter accuracy. It's basically survey grade accuracy. In the photo, you see one of our hourly employees, Mark Avalos, utilizing the technology. It's fairly lightweight, fairly simple. It Bluetooths directly to an iPad and can be utilized in conjunction with our Cartograph OMS software. And we are now expanding. We first started with just collecting asset location information. We're really expanding its use. We're using it now for the installations of new services. So when we go out and there's a new development and they need 5 new water meters to serve that development, we're getting all of that location information, survey quality, as that infrastructure is going into the ground. And now we're expanding that also into our capital improvement. And we are working with our engineering division and having our inspectors also working with this equipment and being able to collect all of this valuable information as we actually have everything exposed. We're also working with our streets department and getting asset information for our valve cans when they're doing street overlay projects, and really finding it as also a tool for us to be able to coordinate internally. Next slide, please. Another challenge that we've had is compliance with the disinfection byproduct rule. As you likely are aware, chlorine is used to disinfect water, and it can react with naturally occurring organic matter in the water and create what is called disinfection byproducts, specifically haloacidic acids and trihalomethanes. And it has been found that when you mix the water in the tanks, that you greatly reduce the formation of these disinfection byproducts. And we were early adopters of this technology, and it really has now started to become an industry standard. So the picture on the left shows you sort of the water turbulence dynamics that are happening in the tank with the mixer. All of that water is more stagnant and not really moving much at all without it. And on the right is the actual device, what one of these devices looks like. And next slide, please. And so this is a graph that shows you the 80 micrograms per liter is the MCL that we were starting to butt up against. And now that we've been installing these mixing systems, we've seen this great downward trend. We have 3 of these mixing systems installed currently, and we are looking at potentially adding a few more. The cost for this technology is going down. And we've also seen that beyond the disinfection byproducts, it's having an additional benefit of helping us stabilize our chlorine residuals. So it's really helping us with maintaining water quality throughout the water distribution system overall. So we're very pleased with this particular pilot and this solution. Next slide, please. The next challenge is flushing. Flushing is an important component of pipe maintenance, another thing that kind of falls under that water main asset category program. And during the drought, you can see on the right, Daniel Montalvo performing a conventional flushing, which is connecting the device to a fire hydrant and getting the water velocities up to a high enough volume to scour the pipes. And then the water is dechlorinated and put into the storm drain. During the drought, that just really wasn't an option. So we looked into what other types of technologies could be available. And we found the NODES, no charge elimination discharge system. And at first we just piloted it and had another company come out and do a proof of concept. Once we found that it was very effective, we've actually purchased the equipment, and a lot of other water utilities are following suit. And we have a brief video we want to show you of a little bit more information on how this equipment works. And with that, I would ask Adriana to please cue the video. It might take a moment or two for it to load, so please just be patient.
The NODES process pumps the water at a velocity high enough to scour the buildup from the water mains, then passes it through a series of filters that remove sediment, biofilm, and particulate matter. It wastes virtually no water and has other advantages over the conventional method, like greater data acquisition.
Now that it's going through the filter truck, we're actually able to look at chlorine levels, turbidity, things like that, and so we're able to take samples and actually get a lot of data from the areas that we're flushing.
We also realized that there was some benefits to flushing the system in a unidirectional manner, which is to get an idea of the velocities and any restrictions or constraints that may occur in the pipe, and then also get an understanding of the buildup in the water mains in these areas.
The NODES system has been so successful, other municipalities have been looking to follow suit.
We were one of the first to pilot this, and in fact, we've had other agencies calling us, asking us how it's going. It's popular. It's going to be the future of flushing and water distribution.
As the Water Resources Division cleans its way through the city's water main system with this cutting-edge technology, you can rest assured that the water delivered to your meter is continually tested and meets or exceeds all state and federal water quality standards. You can also feel good that virtually no water is being wasted to accomplish this.
We're real excited that we were able to procure this piece of equipment and integrate it into our water main program. Really happy with the fact that we were able to pilot it, that it was a success, and that it's got multiple benefits that'll better serve the community long term.
Thank you. And next slide, please. And so just to wrap up, I wanted to let you know that we're continuing this idea of innovation within water distribution. We are working with GIS Inc. to continue to leverage this high precision GPS data that we're collecting. This project has two goals. The first goal is to try to automate some of the process of collecting some of this data that we're getting from the GPS devices and bring it into our geodatabase in a way that's fairly seamless and get to be even closer to real time than it is now. And it's also doing a quality control check on the data. The way that we have our GIS set up is we have our overall citywide geodatabase, and we also have a version that we're using with our cartograph system. And this project will help us with ensuring that those two systems do not get out of sync. We're also looking to pilot Doppler software, which is an automated call management software. We're going to use this to leverage our after hours calls and also our call out process when we need to respond to after hours emergencies. So we're very excited about all these projects and so happy to be able to be here today to share these with you. And with that, we'll wrap things up and be available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Really, really important. I think it was really very, very clear, and I like it. I also really enjoy the fact that you name the people who are working in these different positions. I think that's great. I think that really is very important. So thank you very much for doing that. Great work by everybody, and that video was really, really very nice. Any questions, comments? Yes, Councilmember Sneddon.
Thank you. I just have some comments if you don't have a public comment. You people are so impressive. I just am always so amazed when you give your presentations, just your depth of knowledge, but it's not just that, but your sort of friendly demeanor and customer service is really incredible. And just from a city perspective, it's one of the most basic functions that every one of our community members expects, is to be able to turn on that tap. And this presentation of all, and this isn't even all, but a lot of what goes into making that happen is really to your credit. And I really want to thank you for the coordination you're doing with streets. We were having that where water main work and streets, and a lot of community members writing in, and we don't get that now at all. I think people have really noticed that it's all seamless, and I just want to thank you. This was a fantastic presentation of really just a sliver of what it is that you do, and just thank you.
Commissioner Davis.
Thank you. I second the comments of Councilmember Sneddon. I had it in my notes basically say you guys are the most unheralded heroes in the city. Water is life, and safe and clean water a lot of people don't have, but basically you guys do an incredible job. And to that effect, I wanted to basically say the tape of just this meeting and the PowerPoint be a great asset on onboarding new commissioners when they come here. We're going to have a new commissioner one way or the other coming up because we have a vacancy. I think the idea of a water supply or water system annual report is a great idea. I think a major update every 5 years, and then every year essentially coming back with a status report with changes and challenges would be good. It's a really informative session. I think it's incredible. I have one question, and the time horizon when I was reading the details on the thing was 2050 on the technical study. And I'm curious whether, because I'm as you know, I'm working on the sea level rise. Are there any impacts on the water system on hydraulics from sea level rise down in the lower part of the city? I know we have the wastewater. I understand that one easy, but I don't know if there are any hydraulic impacts from sea level rise over that period from on the water system, distribution system.
I can answer that question. Yeah, so Commissioner Davis, in this planning horizon, there's not big impacts, but we do have take that into consideration. We do obviously have water assets down near the beach, and so we're planning to replace those cast iron pipes in that area with plastic pipes. But yeah, we're going to follow the city's lead when it comes to sea level adaptation. And a lot of our planning is based on the general plan.
Okay, and my last comment really isn't a comment. I just want to congratulate Matthew on his new position, and this was a great start with the commission. So congratulations, Matt.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis.
Commissioner Young.
Thank you, Chair Keller. I wanted to add my a concurrence with those sentiments. This is impressive. And the average citizen does not understand what goes into delivering a glass of clean water. And I would suggest that even this presentation that we just had should be put on public TV somehow in some kind of loop so that people can actually see what goes into maintaining the infrastructure, keeping it up to speed, replacing, repairing, where water comes from. It really is impressive. And I want to thank you guys for doing a great job.
Well, Chair Carroll, Commissioners, thank you for the feedback. Thank you for all the kind words. we'll take that feedback. We want to make this meaningful to you, make this meaningful to the community. So we'll work on next year's presentation and how we'll approach that. And, we want to keep it interactive. We want to keep it relevant. And thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. Well, thank you both of you very much for everybody working at the water resources water system. So do we have any comments from the public or any questions from the public?
Chair Keller, no public comment at this time.
Okay. Well, again, thank you both, all of you working in water resources management and water system management specifically on this. So our next item, administrative item, is local limits and pretreatment program administrative update. So, Mr. Hagman.
Chair Keller, we have with us today Galen Farrer, our water quality superintendent, and Mary Thompson. Is she also joining us today? Yes, and there's Mary, who will be giving us an update on our local limits effort, which has been underway for a long time now. And we're finally pleased to bring this to you. I do want to give you a heads up. This is an item that, if recommended by the commission, would go on to City Council. If approved by the City Council, goes on to the regional board for final approval. So the regional board is the ultimate approver of this at the end of the day. All right. And with that, I'll turn it over to Galen or Mary. Who am I turning it over to?
Thank you, Mr. Hagmark, Chair Keller, Commissioners. Mary Thompson, our acting laboratory supervisor, is going to head up this presentation. And we also have with us today Gorman Lau with Larry Walker and Associates. He has been essential to this whole project. It's been going on for several years, so he's been with us along the way. So I will turn it over to them and take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you, Galen. Good morning, commissioners, and good morning, Chair Keller. I'd like to start off by just giving a brief overview of what I'm going to be talking about, giving you a background on the pretreatment program, and then we're going to talk about the pretreatment program update and the local limits update and the next steps. Next slide, please. Okay, so a little background. Next slide. That pretreatment program is not a everyday word. The pretreatment program really comes as a response to the Clean Water Act that was became a law back in 1972. And it wasn't until 1978 that federal regulations for pretreatment were promulgated. So what is a pretreatment program? It's a federal requirement, which is 40 CFR Part 403, and it's implemented through regional, state, and local programs like this one. Pretreatment is a term used for sewer use requirements for non-domestic sources discharging into our sewer systems that are connected to publicly owned treatment works. So I'm going to be saying that a lot today. So I'm going to use the acronym POTWs for that. Next slide. So who must have a pretreatment program? Well, as defined in those federal regulations, any POTW with a design flow greater than 5 million gallons a day must have a pretreatment program. But however, there are instances where POTWs that have design flows less than 5 million gallons a day because they are directed by a regulatory agency. Next slide. So why do we need to have a pretreatment program? Well, first, we need to protect El Estero Water Resource Center, which is Santa Barbara's POTW, from interference or upset of treatment operations. We need to prevent pass-through of the pollutants. We need to prevent harm to the POTW's infrastructure. And we need to protect biosolids and recycled water quality. Think reuse for that. And we also ultimately need to protect the public health and safety. Next slide, please. So the City of Santa Barbara's pretreatment program was established in the early 1980s, and its legal authority was established in the Title 16 of Santa Barbara's Municipal Code. And that was most recently updated in 2014 in regards to pretreatment. And that document also includes the local limits. And the local limits that are in there now were revised in 1992. The Administrative Procedures Manual was also documented sometime, or revised some time ago in 1992. So as you can see from those dates, that it's time for an update for the pretreatment program. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk to you about the pretreatment program modifications. Next slide. So when I'm talking about updates and modifications, modifications are really needed for the pretreatment program when there are significant changes to the approved program, which was submitted to the regional board many years ago. So we need to update the program to reflect current conditions because it's not 1980s anymore and a lot of things have changed. Like we've had upgrades to El Estero Water Resource Center, our POTW, and we've had changes in the permitted industrial users. So some have left and then some new ones have came. We also have changes in the applicable regulations. Like we were just issued a new NPDES permit in December of 2019. Next slide. So here are the proposed modifications. What we are proposing is that we update the Administrative Procedures Manual, which is our pretreatment program documents, and the Title 16 of the Municipal Code, specifically the local limits. Next slide. So the proposed updates to the administrative documents, I'm going to list them. So we added clarification to the types of wastewater discharge permits. So in 2014, we added tiers to the types of permits. So this actually gives the city more flexibility in that we can have discretion on which types of permits go to which types of industrial users. And then we reduce sampling and inspection frequencies to be aligned with the federal regulations. Next slide. And we also added language about record-keeping procedures. We modified our enforcement section to add clarification. We updated the public participation requirements, and we updated the confidentiality requirements. Next slide. So the proposed modifications to the Title 16 are that we revised the current threshold of 10,000 gallons per day to, or we revised the definition of a significant industrial user from 10,000 gallons a day to 25,000 gallons a day to match the federal standard. As it currently stands at 10,000 gallons a day, we actually are regulating and permitting users that probably don't need to be regulated and participating in this program. But the city will still have discretion and to permit users that are less than 25,000 gallons a day based on potential threats to the POTW. We also added language for monitoring waivers. This gives the city and the users more flexibility. And it also frees the burden of the testing for these constituents. For example, for trace organics, those tests can be very expensive, and monitoring waivers will give us that flexibility. We also are updating those local limits. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk about the local limits update. Next slide, please. I wanted to, okay. Now we want to talk about the local limit update, but I want to give you a little background on that because I'm sure that that's not a common term for the everyday person. So I want to list and give you some definitions here. So local limits are required by 40 CFR Part 403, and it's a technical, local limits are technically placed effluent limits for industrial or other regulated users. Local limits are site specific, so they're tailored to our POTWs using our data. The local limits are numerical pollutant limits established by the city to protect against pass-through interference or increased maintenance and operational costs at its POTW. Next slide. So you might be asking, why do we need local limits? Well, as I mentioned, it's required. And these are for much of the same reasons that we need a pretreatment program. So we also need to protect our POTW and protect, most importantly, health and human safety, and also protecting the environment as well. Next slide. So I want to walk you through the process and this that has taken us several years. So beginning the process, we need to identify our pollutants of concern. And most, you can find those pollutants of concern in many ways. So there is a national list of pollutants of concern. We also need to determine treatment and plant removal efficiencies for each pollutant. We need to identify the environmental and operational restrictions, and we collect that data through sampling. Next slide. So from all that, we can calculate the maximum allowable limit for each pollutant. And with that, we can also calculate the maximum allowable amount of pollutants for industrial or regulated users for those loading for those users. So if you look at the pie chart, I'm talking about the green wedge of that pie. So it's not a large portion, but it is the most impactful. And we also need to review our local limits periodically. Next slide. So here you see a timeline of our update process of our local limits. So the current local limits were established in 1992. And in 2014, we conducted a local limits evaluation. And in 2015, we completed sampling and analysis from different sites in the plant and our collection system as well. Local limits, in 2016, the local limits report was compiled, and in 2017, the report was completed. However, and then we proposed our new local limits, but we also sent notification of the new proposed local limits to the industrial users, to the permanent industrial users, participants of the pretreatment program. In 2017, we started a secondary process upgrade, and also in 2017, we had decided to delay adoption of the new local limits. We had decided to delay adoption of the new local limits to be able to verify and to complete construction. So in 2019, construction and the secondary treatment process upgrade was completed. And in 2020, we did a second evaluation to verify that our proposed local limits that we derived in 2017 were still applicable. And in 2020, recently, we also sent notification to the permitted industrial users. Next slide. So here we have a slide depicting our proposed local limits. You'll see from the table that we have two new limits, one for ammonia and one for molybdenum. And of the existing limits for metals, except selenium and lead, the limits increase. And lead ever so slightly. in oil and grease and cyanide, the limit decreased. And for trace organics, the numerical limits were removed. However, in Title 16, the general prohibitions of the ordinance do contain protective language, which also prohibits those types of discharges. Next slide. So our next steps, next slide. Our next steps are the updates are considered substantial changes. And like Joshua mentioned, that they must have regional board approval prior to implementation. And updates will not be implemented or enforced until that regional board approval is received. Next slide. So our recommendations are that the Water Commission forward this item to City Council for approval, and that City Council forward and approve to the regional board for final approval. Next slide. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think it was very clear. I have a question to begin with. So I can see that you're changing some of the limits, and I was just curious why in some of the metals it's going up slightly, but is it because you feel that you have more capacity to be able to deal with them? You know, metals don't get transformed, so just to understand that change. I can see the other ones going down and others being added, but.
Ronan, do you want to take that, Nancy?
Oh, sure. Chair Keller, the reason why some of the metals kind of change in terms of going up or down is really dependent on the removal efficiency at the treatment plant. So back in 2015 and some of the more recent data that we looked at, we calculated removal efficiencies through the treatment plant using this specific data. That's why Mary was kind of talking about in terms of local limits being really site specific, and it really depends on how the treatment plant performs. So they get adjusted. I mean, it's been quite a while, about 25 years since the last time the local limits were updated at the time that we initially looked at this. So things have changed quite a bit.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you. Councilmember Snedden.
Thank you, Chair Keller. Just a quick question. How hard will it be, or how challenging, if at all, to meet these new limits? Is that a future capital work, or is this something that's easily within what we're doing now?
Thank you for your question, Councilmember Snedden. The new limits for will be challenging for some, but for most, they will be easily. Actually, the new limits, as you can see, most of those metals allow for more, a little bit more allowance. So there would be no, you know, capital or infrastructure issues with that.
May I just follow up? So is there a time frame for implementation by the dischargers? What's the time frame for them to sort of meet the new limits?
So, like I mentioned, the new limits will not be implemented or enforced until we receive regional board approval. And that could take some time.
Yes, I understand that. But even then, because they don't know when that happens, they have to have some time to implement whatever modifications. For example, I think, for example, ammonia would be one where if someone has been discharging ammonia and all of a sudden now there's a limit, they need to sort of think, okay, what investments do they need to go out there? So do we give them a certain time frame for them to comply?
Go ahead,
yeah, Chair Keller. Yes, the federal regulations allow for compliance schedules to be implemented for the permitted dischargers. Typically, it's about 9 months. It's kind of the limit, but there's flexibility to extend that as well. The other thing that I wanted to follow up with Mary's response to the councilwoman was that these are concentration-based limits, and there is flexibility within the regulations to allow for mass loading limits and alternative limits that could be technically derived to help accommodate compliance as well. And we've done that for a couple of the industrial dischargers to the city already to give them some alternative compliance alternatives.
Okay. Commissioner Young.
Thank you, Chair Keller. So this is interesting for me because being on the regional board, I usually see this from the other end of things. And it never comes to the board level. This is always handled by our EO. But now I get to think about this a little bit more. So each of these entities that are discharging into the city's wastewater collection system, they must have some kind of a small treatment box or facility to do this treatment. I've never really thought about it. What requirements are there that they have to maintain these, that they have to test their output, that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing? Can you clarify that for me?
Yes, absolutely. So these facilities or dischargers, they have their own individual permits, and outlined in those permits are their requirements. So yes, and those requirements will include or do include a responsibility to keep their systems maintained and working properly. And also for those systems, I mean, some of the smaller users may not have pretreatment systems. So their discharge is managed by best management practices. So if it's housekeeping or physical, filtration or something in that nature, yes, they do that.
Okay, and so this is a permit that you're issuing to them. And
That's
so are they submitting a monthly, quarterly, annual report to you for your review?
Yes. Most, some do, like you said, a monthly, and some are, required semi-annual or quarterly. It depends, and it's under the discretion of the city and of how much oversight they need. Mm-hmm.
And so does the city have follow-up then where you are spot checking and going
Correct.
out? Okay.
Correct.
So
We do monitoring, and we also do semi-annual inspections at this point.
How many pre-treatment permits do you have?
Well, we have somewhere in the realm of between 8 and 10 and significant industrial user permits, but we also permit like tier 3, like groundwater dischargers and things like that. Yes, so there's a varying amount of those as well.
So that sounds like a fairly low number.
Yes, it is. Well, Santa Barbara is not very industrial. We have a few of them that have, but they also need to be monitored as well.
Okay, great.
Thompson,
Thank you.
can you speak to something that some of us can relate to, a brewery, for example? How do you manage their discharges?
Okay, so breweries are not permitted in the same sense that significant industrial users are permitted. They are they're regulated by surcharges, or they are regulated by spot check visits. We visit them, and we have established a BMP program for breweries and wineries. We gave them outreach, and they are required to put if you walk into some of their facilities, you'll see one of our city's posters, and it basically tells them if they have questions, if they have a discharge that they need to do, they need to contact the city, and there are my phone numbers on there. So breweries and wineries are handled a little differently than these permitted significant industrial users, but they're part of the pretreatment program, yes.
All right, Commissioner Davis.
Thank you. I'll start by saying the subject matter is not something I'm totally familiar with, so excuse me if my questions are kind of crazy or dumb. They're no dumb questions. The definitions, when you're talking about daily max and daily max limits, just for a layperson, when I look at arithmetic average of all samples for a calendar year being the max, are there any issues that we have with spiking from people basically who have big discharges at one time, which that fold into the mold?
Well, we haven't seen that. And the permitted industrial users have individual permit limits as well as the limits listed there in as far as the local limits. Mhm.
Okay, and they self-report?
Yes.
Okay. My next question is on the change from 10,000 gallons to 25,000 gallons in the significant industrial user. Why did the feds change the standard? Do you know? Why did
No,
it go?
it was not the feds that changed the standard. It was us. So the federal standard has always been 25,000 gallons. But early on, the city had adopted the 10,000 gallon a day limit. And we, from the data that we collected and from the permits that we have, we wanted to align ourselves with the federal standard. Mhm.
Okay, but what you're basically saying is we've not seen any issues below
Correct.
25,000. Therefore, we essentially can move up to the 25,000 without basically creating any problems.
Correct. Mhm.
Okay. Okay.
Commissioner
Dan?
Davis, Commissioner Davis, I just wanted to add a little bit to that. In terms of kind of moving the standards back to the federal regulations, it's kind of to give the city a little bit more flexibility, and kind of the sampling that was proposed and in the approved program, for example, is way more sampling that's required than is necessary on the federal level. So what we're trying to do is get the city's program up to the federal, scale it back to the federal standards, but the city's still going to have discretion to permit dischargers that are below 25,000 gallons a day or sample more frequently for those industrial users that are of more concern. But it's just to keep the city from having to regulate smaller dischargers that really aren't as much of a concern as frequently as the city's currently doing now.
No, I think I understood it, and that's really good. I think the goal there is basically a really good goal. I'm trying to understand, and again, you really led into my next question. Is like, how do you identify those permits below 25,000 that you want to condition? Is that simply off of their reporting, your history with them, or whatever the case may be?
Well, the city, conducts industrial user surveys. And we also, I do monitor the business license listings as part of our surveying to see if any new industrial users or potential permittees have come into our city. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great, thanks. And then, and just down in the weeds, per se, there are a combination of the oil and grease limits that we had before. You'd combined them all into a general type of thing. Is there a reason why we did that? And were there issues before why they were separate?
Well, sir, the treatment plant has had change in processes and operations.
That's what I assumed.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, good. I assumed that it had to do with essentially how we were treating and again, the upgrades we've had over the last 5-6 years. Okay, and then just lastly, question on the BMPs. You're moving it from an ordinance, changing from an ordinance to administrative guidelines. And I totally get the easier to change and what have you, and to make amendments. Are there any, if you will, issues then regarding enforcement and or being legally binding when it's only a guideline, which is administrative versus an ordinance?
Well, sir, those are actually two separate things. The administrative guidelines and procedural documents are part of the pretreatment program approved documents. The ordinance is our legal authority to do the enforcement. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think I read it a little differently at some point, that the question on BMPs themselves was basically changing on how you deal with those from an ordinance to administrative guidelines. And previously, and maybe I misunderstood, previously BMPs were covered under a separate ordinance, or did I misunderstand that?
Dan, do you have any input on that?
Honorable Chair and Commissioner Davis, the structure is that the regulations are adopted by the ordinance itself. Using the administrative guidelines is a way that we can implement the administrative requirements and make easy changes to them in a manner that's legally sufficient. So we've reviewed our office has reviewed the ordinance. I've actually drafted the ordinance that is before you. And so we're confident that we have the regulatory enforcement requirements that we need, and that the administrative guidelines that we have will allow us to have a kind of a seamless implementation program. So the answer to your question, the short answer to your question is yes, it's enforceable.
Yeah, that's the short. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, and I do want to appreciate the report too, because I thought it very complete, and I haven't read that many pages in a hell of a long time. Sorry.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Do we have any public comment or questions?
Yes, we do. Right now, we have 2 people wanting to make public comment. As a reminder, you have 2 minutes to make a public comment. The timer will start when you begin speaking. For Linda Blackburn, you are first.
And Councilman Member Sneddon. I'm Berlinda Blackburn. I'm the authorized representative for Marburg Industries Liquid Waste Division. Can you folks hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, although Marburg does not meet the 40 CFR 4036 criteria for an SIU, we don't discharge 25,000 gallons a day. We don't make up 5% or more of the average dry weather hydraulic loading or capacity at the plant, which is 11 MGD and designed for 19 MGD. Our average flow at Marburg is 19,000 gallons a day. Our maximum is 23,000 gallons a day. But with that said, Marburg would like to know how the local limits will affect the high strength surcharge limits, or if they're related in any way. Currently, the baseline for ammonia is 90 milligrams per liter for ammonia, and the new local limit has a limit of 490 milligrams per liter. So we like to know how those 2 things are related. Second, the proposed city limit for the uniform local limits for total oil and grease was calculated at 12,000 milligrams per liter for total oil and grease, and the limit has been reduced to 100 milligrams per liter. And I totally understand that 12,000 milligrams per liter of oil and grease is prohibitive and would cause issues in the sewer system and the treatment system. Marburg was previously given a limit of 400 milligrams per liter for total oil and grease, which is far below the 12,000 milligrams per liter from the study. And we would like to know what the possibility of moving that limit to 400 milligrams per liter. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, so hi Berlinda, the relationship between the HSS and the local limits are really that there's no relationship. They're really 2 separate items. The local limit is, like I explained, that it was derived from data that we have taken and from our plant specific. The HSS is a rate, and it is a separate item. The oil and grease, we wanted that to be protective in nature due to the plant processes, but also, as I mentioned, that Marburg can still apply for an alternate limit, provided that they submit a technical justification for the limit that they're proposing. Thank you.
Our next public comment is coming from Allison Thompson. Allison, you have 2 minutes to speak.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Hi there. Hello, Chair Keller and commissioners. My name is Allison Thompson, and I work at Heal the Ocean. I will be speaking today on behalf of Hillary Hauser, the Executive Director of Heal the Ocean. Hillary Hauser asked me to tell the Water Commission that Heal the Ocean will be supporting the ordinance to amend the Municipal Code Title 16 regarding liquid and industrial waste disposal to update the pretreatment program administrative documents. And before this item goes to City Council in December, she would like to meet with either Galen Fair or Joshua about the subject of pretreatment program, including hospital wastewater, and classifying hospitals as industrial dischargers to be regulated under such ordinance. Right now, the expert panel for CEC, Contaminants of Emerging Concern, is meeting at the SoCal Coastal Water Research Project to discuss an update on CECs and NDMAs still going into the ocean and found in sea animals. HTO doesn't want hardship for the hospital, but communities around the world pre-treat hospital wastewater. There are pharma filters or ozonation devices that take out a long list of pathogens, bacteria, virus, antibiotics, antibiotic resistant, genes, and so forth. Of particular concern now is COVID, which we know comes into the wastewater plant because it is measured in the influent before treatment to gauge infection in the community. Unknown impact to wastewater treatment plant is aeration, the first step in wastewater process, and the issue of COVID possibly becoming airborne. Hillary wants me to get a meeting together with you, with your appropriate people before this ordinance goes to City Council in December. She will send an email to somebody on the commission. Thank you so much for your time.
Just as a follow-up, Allison, we'd be happy to meet with you and Hillary Hauser to talk about this further. Galen, Mary, and even Gorman, we're happy to speak with you more about that.
And Allison, I just want to let you know that the hospital is one of our industrial users. They're permitted because a lot of their laboratory, in the past, their laboratory had a lot of operations. They have since moved out to Goleta, but their operations dictated that we would have an industrial permit for them. So they are still monitored out of, the challenge with the hospital is that they've got, I think, 23 outfalls, Mary, correct me if I'm wrong. 27. So we are monitoring just one of them currently, but it has been in discussion. Mary and I have discussed that multiple times, and we keep going back and forth on whether we want to permit every single outfall, what the workload would be if we were to do that. And then in addressing your COVID concerns, we are still monitoring COVID in the influent, and I am happy to report that we've had 2 consecutive non-detects from the samples we've had. So we seem to be, things seem to be calming down here in Santa Barbara, but we are still monitoring for that. But we are happy to meet with you or Hillary before we take this to council.
Okay, well, thank you very much. No further public comments or questions?
No further public comment at this time.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So we have a recommendation, so we need to have a vote on that recommendation. So we have a motion.
Yes, Chair Keller. No, Chair Keller, I'm ready to make a motion if you don't mind.
I'm ready.
Okay, I would recommend that the Water Commission recommend to council that staff recommendations: A, introduction and adoption of the ordinance, and B, submission of the program to the Regional Water Quality Control Board.
And I'll second that.
Okay, so if we can have the roll call.
Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kilborn,
Yes.
and Chair Keller.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. So for our third administrative item, we have a presentation from the Alliance for Water Efficiency and talking about the platinum level recognition. So please go ahead.
Sure. Chair Keller and members of the Water Commission, my name is Madeline Wood. I'm the Water Conservation Supervisor. And today I am here to, I'm pleased to present to you that we have been awarded the platinum level of recognition by the Alliance for Water Efficiency. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Jasmine Showers, who led the effort in that recognition.
Thank you, Chair Keller and members of the Water Commission. My name is Jasmine Showers, and I'm a water resources specialist. The City of Santa Barbara was awarded platinum status by the Alliance for Water Efficiency and the G480 Water Conservation Program Operation and Management Standard Leaderboard. I will briefly present information about the Alliance for Water Efficiency, explain the G480 standard, the application process, and the significance of this platinum recognition. Next slide, please. This slide shows the Alliance for Water Efficiency Platinum Standard Leaderboard. And Platinum Standard is the highest recognition on the leaderboard, and the city shares this distinction with only 5 other water providers: Austin Water Utility in Texas, and 4 other California water utilities: Irvine Ranch Water District, City of Santa Cruz, Valencia Water Company, and Western Municipal Water District. Next slide, please. The Alliance for Water Efficiency, or AWE, is a nationwide stakeholder-based nonprofit organization. They are dedicated to the efficient and sustainable use of water. AWE was established in 2007 and serves as a North American advocate for water-efficient products and programs. Member water provider agencies are offered policy advocacy, resources and tools, research, education and training, and peer networking. There are currently 491 water provider members around the nation, and the city has been a member agency since 2008. Next slide, please. The G480 standard is a voluntary nationwide standard that water providers can adopt at their own discretion. It is based on the Water Conservation Program Operation and Management Standard developed by the American Water Works Association, and that was approved by the American National Standards Institute in April 2013. AWE verifies compliance with this G480 standard and then publishes the results on the G480 leaderboard. And the G480 standard describes the critical elements of an effective water conservation program. And this encompasses activities undertaken within its own operations to improve both the water supply and water demand. And the water conservation meeting this standard has the potential to impact all water users in the community. Next slide, please. And the city has a robust water conservation program and fulfilled all of the G480 standard categories with 100% compliance. First, the city has a dedicated staff for water conservation efforts. For public information and education, we submitted printed ad examples and gave links to our water conservation website and YouTube videos. We demonstrated over 30 years of compliance with the Water Waste Ordinance and Water Loss Control Program category. The city's first water waste ordinance was passed in 1989. For water supply metering, we actually have over 100 years of data. We submitted documents showing measurements of stream discharge at Gibraltar Dam as far back as April 1920. And for water service, the city has metered all water service connections since 1973. The city has a strong history of non-promotional water rates. We've had volumetric water rate billing since 1976, and customers continue to be based on the volume of water they used. The city adopted a resolution to promote water conservation in new development landscapes in 1989. Landscape water efficiency is also much of the focus of our public education and website resources. Next slide, please. In addition to the historical documents, city ordinances, water conservation participation data, and California state compliance documents, the city had to demonstrate a history of water conservation planning. The first water conservation plan for the city was dated in 1984 and with a revision in 1995.
And this year's water conservation strategic plan that you reviewed last month was an essential part of the G480 standard application. Next slide, please. So what is the impact of this status? Achieving platinum status on the leaderboard demonstrates that the city is a nationwide leader in water conservation. Third-party recognition will help reinforce the success of our water conservation program, especially for the electronic annual report submitted to the California State Water Resources Control Board, Division of Drinking Water, and for the Water Conservation BMP's annual report submitted to the federal government Bureau of Reclamation. This platinum status will also help bolster future grant funding applications. Next slide, please. And that's it. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, this is fantastic, and I really want to thank everybody in the city that works on these issues on conservation and all these issues has done a tremendous job. But in particular, having done this, I think this is really, really something that makes the city very proud and makes all of us here at the Water Commission very proud as well. Commissioner Young.
I was just going to say congratulations, and get the word out to the public.
Yes. Councilmember Sneddon, 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, enthusiastic. Congratulations.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
All to play through. So I mean, you guys are doing a fantastic job in many, many things. So thanks again.
It's exciting when we know how much work we put into our conservation program. We see the benefits. We see how our customers are responding to it and how that works. And I think it's just nice here to actually see like a formal recognition of all the efforts that have gone into that program. So great work, team, on the conservation. I'm really proud of everybody for what we've done, and really fortunate that we have such a supportive Water Commission and City Council to make that happen. So thank you all.
Thank you.
And citizenship also, because they have also been really important in making it happen. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So is there any public comment? Sorry.
Chair Keller, no public comment at this time.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So that concludes our administrative items. So now we go to the water resource managers report. We've received it, so we can go fairly quickly through it.
Jared Keller, I have to
Yes,
leave.
Commissioner.
Unfortunately, I have to leave here at 11 o'clock. So I wanted just to let you all know that my apologies for having to leave to go to another meeting. But I wanted to say good meeting today. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. All right. So Chair Keller, Joshua Hagmark, Water Resources Manager, here today to go over a few things. Obviously, I'm available to answer anything in the manager's report, but I did want to highlight a few things before we got into that. So we have, starting in January, we're going to have 2 vacancies on the Water Commission. We were sad to hear that Vice Chair Kilborn will be leaving us. But he did spend 8 years on the Water Commission, and we do really appreciate all of his support and guidance over that time period. Certainly some difficult times in there. And then we're also looking to fill Commissioner Bernie's position that was vacated in January, February of 2020, and the COVID impacts kind of delayed recruitments for those commission vacancies. So those applications were all due last week. I have yet to check in with the city clerk's office to see how many applications we have, but I did have quite a few people reach out to me and ask questions. It was exciting to see the interest in the position. So I hope that that shows up in the applications. I may be, there are a few of them that have asked to make contact with you, Chair Keller, and Councilmember Sneddon. So I'll be in touch on those. So I just want to get that out there. Okay. I also wanted to get out there Water Vision Month. This is October Water Vision Month. We are working through, we've been putting a lot of information out there for the community to get engaged. Last week we had lunch and learns from 12 to 1, Monday through Friday last week. and went over a lot of interesting topics that the public has asked us to speak to. So I hope those end up being helpful. Participation was I think we had typically about 10 people from the public each day, but we did record those presentations and we'll be making those available. In addition, we have a social pinpoint as part of the Water Vision Month. We're looking for public engagement on topics concerning water supply. So we're looking for folks to weigh in. They have questions, they have concerns, things they want addressed. We want to hear from everybody. We are looking to have 2 public meetings on our water supply planning with the Water Commission in November. I think we have dates of November 12th. We're going to have a special meeting, and then our standing meeting on the 19th. Both those meetings are going to be heavily influenced by the water supply planning study that is underway. I also wanted to note that we'll be bringing the La Cumbre Recycled Water Agreement to you soon. I don't know if we'll make it November, but probably December. And then also wanted to note that we've had no sewer spills in calendar year 2020. It's a huge accomplishment for our wastewater collection team, so we're really proud. Thank you. Yeah, really proud of that team. They've been working really hard for years, and we're just, it's just nice to see it culminating these kind of results. I also wanted to inform you about a signing ceremony for the water supply agreement with Montecito. They were interested in having a signing ceremony, and we're going to be doing that virtually next week, October 21st at 9:30 a.m. After this meeting, I'll send you guys invites. There is it's been noticed, but I will be sending you a specific invite. And I'd like, if you can, to RSVP, because I do want to recognize you at that meeting as well, along with any council members that will be participating from the city. But it's likely to take 15 to 20 minutes. It's going to be short and sweet. We just want to talk a little bit about the success of working together with our partners in water. And then I just wanted to update you on the carryover issue. As we brought to your attention last month, we've been working with USBR on this issue of USBR's wanting to cap our carryover, which is very concerning to all the Kachuma member units. And we were successful at getting the Bureau to back down on trying to implement something for this coming contract year. But it sounds like the Bureau is really invested in doing something to cap carryover as part of our larger Kachuma contract updates. So that'll be something we'll be working on over the next 2 to 3 years. And in the meantime, we'll be working on information to make sure they know how critical carryover is to the city's water supply planning effort. And on a final note here, I just want to know that it's kind of an interesting opportunity. We are working right now with Tesla on an opportunity to install a industrial battery at the Decatur Water Treatment Plant. Right now there is funding, S-CHIP funding available for industrial facilities in high fire areas like Decatur is located. And the cost of the project, which is estimated around $3 million, would be entirely picked up between this S-CHIP money and Tesla. So it'd be no out of pocket to the city, but we are exploring it. This battery would provide approximately 4 hours of power to power the facility during potential PSPSs or other emergency power grid needs. So we are kind of excited about this. More details to come. And of course, the devil is in the details. We'll see, nothing is free. So we'll see exactly what strings are attached, but we are kind of excited to really get into this battery market and help support our local electrical grid. And with that, I want to say happy Water New Year. October 1st was the beginning of our new water supply year. And as you'll see with our chart here, it kind of is it's all filled out. So it's kind of a summary of the year in total. And so with that, I'm here to answer any questions you may have had with the report that was sent out.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we do any questions, there's a special item that was brought to my attention. So we would like to start with that. And so before we go forward, Brian, if you want to go forward with that.
All right. Am I showing up?
Nope.
We can hear you, Brian.
Okay, let me close.
We can hear you, Brian.
Okay. I think I needed to leave my other meeting. Let me try one thing real quick, and then if not, we will just live with the sound. There we go. That's what happens when you try to do 2 meetings at the same time. So anyway, Chair Keller, thank you for this opportunity. And Josh is probably wondering what the heck is the acting public works director doing on this call at the end. And Josh, I wanted to recognize you for your 20 years of service with the city of Santa Barbara. Recognizing people for their outstanding work is something that does not come naturally to me. And yes, there are some guests that may be walking into your room at a safe distance. But we have Amanda Flessy back there, and Matt Ward is lingering somewhere back there as well. And one of them has your 20-year pin.
Wow. Wow.
A letter from the city administrator. And like I said, recognizing people is something I don't often take the time out to do. And Josh, you actually helped me to recognize that in myself. And so you're now immediately receiving some benefit from that. And yes, I mean, you've been there for as long as I've been working at the city, Josh. And one thing I noticed with you on day one is your passion for the work, just kind of an unparalleled thing. And I remember envying that right away, thinking, man, I wish I could have that myself. And I think I'm not at your level but I'm pretty happy with where I've been able to get to. And I think you helped me get there. A couple other things I wanted to mention. You know, you're just really pure in terms of your motivation for improving, whether it be the infrastructure, the organization, or your reaching out to the community. You've got a real pure heart for the work that you're doing, and it's noticeable. I look back at what has happened in water resources in the time that you've been involved, and it's incredible. The amount of change that has taken place for the good, and looking at, and the reason that we felt like recognizing you at Water Commission made a lot of sense is you've worked really hard to make the Water Commission a really helpful part of water resources. And you've got great relationships with the commissioners, and hopefully if they have time, they can say a word or two. This all kind of culminated in the One Water. I think that's a great example of what you're all about. And anyway, I'll let other people, if they want to, speak, because they've worked more closely with you on the water staff. But Josh, I thought this was a good opportunity to surprise you and appreciate you for your 20 years of outstanding service with the city of Santa Barbara. Thank you so much.
You got me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
I'm honored.
I'm the chair of the commission, but it's an honor for me to be the one that had to sort of introduce the special item. And I think that you've done a fantastic job as a water resources manager, and it shows with all the awards that we saw today, the motivation that everybody has. It's not just your passion, but you've transmitted it to everyone, and that is something that really demonstrates tremendous leadership. So congratulations, and the city is very lucky to have you. I will let other people talk. Commissioner Young.
Thank you. Josh, I don't know you well, but I wanted to say that I've seen a lot of managers and supervisors come before me in my different capacities, and you are truly professional. And I always enjoy your presentations, what you have to tell us, your follow-up, your concern with making sure the commissioners have every bit of information they need, to make decisions. Allowing me to take that field trip up to Gibraltar Reservoir and the dam was great. And I just want to say congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, Council Member Sneddon.
Thank you. I just want to echo congratulations. And I was actually really surprised that it was 20 years because of your enthusiasm and just what you bring to everything. And I really want to echo the sentiments of your sort of pure intentions and thoughts. You're extremely trustworthy, and I really value all the input that you offer to Water Commission and on all water issues. And I'm very grateful for your leadership and stewardship of this department, and hoping for another 20 years beyond this one. So congratulations.
I don't think he's over for another 20. Congratulations, Joshua. That's awesome accomplishment, being with the city for 20 years and being in the capacity you've been in. It's been a pleasure working with you. You've done a great job in corralling your staff and your team. And again, yeah, I kind of sentiment everybody else's comments is, you've very motivated, or you motivate your team well and make them all do the best they can do. So congrats.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. I am humbled and honored that you guys would take the time to recognize that. And I feel like I have such an interesting, I volunteered when I first started working here. I was volunteering, and it was just a stepping stone to getting a real job. And it's just been amazing career working for the city. And I still laugh because when Rebecca had offered me this position, initially I said, nah, that's not me. Like I'm not capable of stepping up into those shoes. And then she insisted, and I'm really glad I did stick with it. It's been a challenging transition with the wildfires, drought, pandemic, mudslides, you name it. But I'm just honored to work with such a great water commission and a great community that's really been supportive of really all these forward-thinking initiatives with our waters. So thank you all for entrusting me with this, and I appreciate the recognition today. Thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you very much. Just to finish up, any questions before we close this fantastic session and this great recognition? Okay, well, thank you again. And again, congratulations to everyone, and particularly to Josh for those 20 years. Thank you, everybody. Okay.
Thank you.
We'll see you next month. Bye-bye.